Hello, everyone. Welcome to this CASE event, Coping During COVID, Mental Wellness in the Midst of a Pandemic. This is the first in a series of seminars centered on the coronavirus pandemic. The impetus for this series is the impact that COVID-19 has had on all of us at CASE. We've been in telecommute status since mid-March, and we wanted to make sure everyone is dealing with the changes as successfully as possible. Upcoming sessions will focus on ways to collaborate online and also ways to stay healthy, eating right, exercising right, while being confined to your house. So stay tuned for dates on those seminars. And if you have other ideas on corona-related topics you'd like to see through this CASE seminar series, please shoot me an email at noel, Noel, @inl.gov. Today, though, we're really thrilled to have Dr. Daniel Weinrich to discuss the ill effects the pandemic can have on our mental health and productive ways to combat those. Dr. Weinrich is a counselor with Idaho National Laboratories EAP, Employee Assistance Program, which provides assessment, counseling, and referral services for INL employees and their dependents. Dr. Weinrich earned his PhD in Adult and Organizational Learning from the University of Idaho and a Master's in Experimental Psychology and a Bachelor's in Psychology, both from ISU, Idaho State University. For those of you who are unfamiliar with CASE, both of Dr. Weinrich's alma maters are members of the CASE Consortium, along with Idaho National Laboratory, Boise State, and University of Wyoming. CASE was actually designed to promote collaboration amongst the 5 CASE entities and to leverage the resources of these entities, our expertise, and all kinds of collectiveness, the collaboration between us all for the benefit of all 5 of our institutions. This seminar series is a great example of that. We're so pleased to be able to bring this to you and Dr. Weinrich's presentation today. A quick thanks to 2 very important folks on the team who recognized the importance of this seminar series and stepped up and volunteered to organize it on top of everything else they're doing. Special thanks to Donna Wuttrich and Blanca Rico. In addition to our IT mastermind, Eric. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Weinrich.
Thank you very much. If you look at this beginning slide, I was uncertain about how to define this presentation, and I decided to do the 2020, the blurry year of blurry vision. And I think if we all sit back and look at where we were, say 3 months ago, we all had very different images of where we thought we were and where we wanted to be. Next week, I would like to be on a beach in Costa Rica. However, that's been changed. And one of the things that's happened, not only have our goals been blurred and things made unpredictable, but the sense of who we are and the sense of purpose that we have has also been blurred. And I think about the idea that I'm now working from home, and as an employee assistance professional through the INL, what I've tried to teach employees is that we need to have a good healthy balance of work life and home life, that we need to be able to look at our professional lives and personal lives and make determinations and keep those in balance. And all of that seems to have been thrown out the window in the last couple of months, in the sense that suddenly we're home and our personal and our professional lives are blurring together. And that's why I thought now might be the time for us to review and refine what we do. This workshop is intended to assist folks in becoming aware of their personal problem-solving strategies and to assist them with evaluating their thought processes. A crisis requires people to refine and reformulate what they know to cope more effectively. Learning that self-care is not selfish is a good start. I'll talk a bit about the idea of redefining what we've seen. A lot of us who engage in self-care will immediately start to say, I'm being selfish right now. I need to be in the house helping with the kids, or I need to be cleaning the litter box. And in essence, what we really need to do maybe is just be sitting out back, taking a deep breath. And relabeling that part of this self-care is not selfish, it's something we need to do to self-replenish and make ourselves, allow ourselves to make the transition through this time. The unpredictable part of it, what's the duration of this episode? One of the things I frequently warn folks about is that I say, if you're the person who already blames the world for your unhappiness, and you're the person who already knows everything, this workshop is probably going to be a bummer. And what I'm going to tell you, folks, is a lot of things you already know. And what I want to do is do a thought experiment to see if maybe you're the person that's interfering with your thriving through this episode. What are we here for? We talked about in the introduction, I have a master's and a bachelor's in experimental psychology. The difference between a magician and an experimental psychologist is a magician will, an experimental psychologist will pull habits out of rats. What we do is we're looking for how to make animals, how to make people do things. And when we first studied behavior therapy, we looked at what are the positive things that increase the likelihood of behavior, what are the negative things that decrease the likelihood of the behavior. And we began to look at changing folks and the way they felt and the way they behaved by changing the contingencies in their life. That's a good concept and it has its effectiveness, but we needed more than just that. Because what happens is you're going to find out in dealing with people is what they find to be extremely positive might be negative for others and vice versa. I liked Winston Churchill, who said, "There's no greater thrill than being shot at and missed." I think there are very few of us that would appreciate being shot at and missed, but there are some people who strive in that world where near misses and drama are very exciting. So I started to study cognitive behavior therapy, and that's what the focus of this will be about today. And in cognitive behavior therapy, we talk about the power of thought and the power of language. Our thoughts are created through the language that we use to convey our world. Martin Heidegger said it very well. He said, "The being of man is founded in language, but it only becomes authentic in conversation." That who we are as people is not really known until we begin to converse and begin to let people know how we define the world and the way we want to discuss things. So I want to look a lot at language because I believe if we start to understand a person's language, we begin to understand how they think and ultimately how they will feel. To tie this all together, back when I was working on my PhD, I did some study at the University of Utah in a theory called interpersonal reconstructive theory. And what interpersonal reconstructive theory talked about is how do people interact? How are we connected? I think one of the biggest difficulties we're all having right now is we have lost connectedness with ourselves and we've lost connectedness with the people that we used to see every day. And right now I'm having a very difficult time with this sort of connection because usually when I do these presentations, I'm able to see people, I'm able to look them in the eye, I'm able to get a read on, am I failing at this or am I actually succeeding? Am I making some sort of connection? And talking to the screen is an interesting piece that I'm going to have to learn to adapt to. I think it's an adaptation we're all going to have to make in the sense of how do we make connection and how do we know if the connections are working or not without the cues that we're used to having. So in interpersonal reconstructive theory, they always talked about the emotions that are evoked in us when we're talking to people. And then they also talked about, are we aware of how we get people to treat us? And then on top of that, how do we treat ourselves? The reason I have the voice in your head is I'm asking you the question of, if you're working on something today and you make a mistake, what is the voice in your head? Who is the voice in your head? The person that says that was a very good job, or the person who says you lose or you could have done that differently, you should have done that differently. Because what we believe in IRT is a lot of times the patterns that we pick up, the ways we behave, the ways we think, the way we feel are patterns that were given to us as legacies of love from our family. So sometimes the voice in our head is our father. It could be our critical father. It could be our overly compassionate mother. And so I want folks to kind of investigate the voice in their head, what the voice says, and is the voice rational and realistic in its presentation of the facts. One of the things we'll find is there are certain people that will evoke emotions in us. Sometimes I want to scream at that person. And I know we've all had experiences in our lives where we talk to people, chat with them, and quickly we want to either walk away from them, we want to tell them off. At the worst, we want to smack them upside the head and say, straighten up. But there are certain people in our lives that will evoke those kind of emotions in us. And I believe the reasons they evoke those kind of emotions in us is because they really don't know how they're behaving. They really don't understand that the things they're doing and saying provoke feelings in other people. And those people are really stuck in a way of behaving that is not good for them. And so what I believe is we look at the language that they're using that keeps them stuck. And if we understand the language they're using that keeps them stuck, we can also look at the language we use for ourselves. One of my pet examples will be later on in the thought experiment, there is what I call, it's number 3, and it's a yeah but. The yeah but is somebody comes to me and asks for support, or they ask for help, and I say, one of the things I would like you to do is I would like you to go outside and breathe fresh air. And they say, yeah, I would do that, but I live near a cattle pasture, a cow pasture. And I say, oh, okay, how about you go to the front door and breathe out the front door for some fresh air? Oh, you don't understand. There's a garbage dump in front of my house. The frustration begins that the more we talk to the person, try to help them, they always have a reason for why they cannot follow through on the suggestions we make. And as a consequence, we want to scream at them, we want to yell at them, and we want to give up on that relationship. So sometimes I believe we don't even know that we're doing that. And that's why I want to bring this out and talk about it a little bit more clearly today. First of all, I want to define a crisis because I think that's what we're in the middle of. An acute emotional reaction to a powerful stimulus or demand, a state of emotional turmoil. 3 characteristics of the crisis. Now, this is the important one. The balance between thinking and emotions is disturbed. We just aren't thinking and feeling as clearly as we used to. This is another part we're going to talk about. The usual coping mechanisms that we generally use to get along, they don't work anymore. They're failing. There is evidence of impairment in the individual or the group involved in the crisis. Somehow we're just not where we used to be, or somehow we're not doing what we used to do. The crisis intervention that we look at is temporary, but an active and supportive entry into the life of the individuals or the groups during a period of extreme distress. Emotional first aid, a different intervention. What we talk about is different intervention tools are needed for each individual or for the groups. One of the things you've heard of probably in the past is what they call a critical incident stress debriefing. This is used for the military, this is used for police officers, this is used in fire departments, that if a group of people are called into a traumatic situation, after that traumatic situation, we do what's called a critical incident stress debriefing, where we sit down and we discuss the incident with the people. It's not a critique, it's not an evaluation of how people performed, it is evaluation of how the person is reacting to that crisis. During that evaluation, let me define this very quickly. A traumatic event is an incident that causes physical, emotional, spiritual, or psychological harm. The person experiencing the distressing event may feel threatened, anxious, or frightened as a result. The person will need support and time to recover from the traumatic event and regain emotional and mental stability. One of the things that I find myself doing right now during this traumatic or dramatic event is that I keep saying, I should know when this is over. I should be able to make plans. I should be able to move forward in my career. And I'm beginning to understand that this event does not have a timetable that I understand. And it's an awakening for me that I have to slow my pace down and understand that this event will unfold as it needs to unfold, and I have to be prepared either long-term or short-term to deal with it. Now, when I talk to people who've been traumatized and we talk about the critical incident stress debriefing, these are some of the suggestions we make. The ones I really want you to call, the one I really want you to call attention to is number 1, I believe this is essential in people getting over what they're going through. And when I talk about exercise, I mean the ability to exercise to a point where you are breathing hard, that you are spending off some of the emotional energy. The other two I want to direct you to are number 8 and number 9. We'll talk more about these in a bit. But one of the things I don't encourage people to do is don't medicate, and then again, don't make any major life decisions at this point. We're all stressed out, and the worst time to make major life decisions is when we're stressed. We usually end up making impulsive and poor decisions at that point. In the final phase of doing a CISD with people, we talk about the physiological and the emotional part of the event. If all of us were walking down the street and we saw somebody get hit by a bus, we would all have a very predictable response to that event. Even though we weren't involved and we witnessed a traumatic event, we would all have very similar experiences. The number one thing that would happen to all of us that night is our inability to sleep. We wouldn't be able to sleep well because we would keep having flashbacks and intrusive thoughts about the event that we just witnessed. As a consequence of that, many of us would think, well, if I can't, I should be able to sleep. I should be able to get over this. Maybe I'll just take some sleeping medication. Maybe I'll just drink a little extra alcohol. Maybe I'll smoke some weed. We do things that are in the short term okay, but long term will have long-term impact. So what happens in the brain is that there's a continual replaying of the event. And what the brain will try to do is, we have a brain that's good at learning from bad events. And the brain will try to integrate this information into our thinking and say, look, you've been through this before, you've seen this before, and suddenly we will start remembering, start hooking up and linking with other traumas that we've had in the past. And this is the limbic system's attempt for us to understand that you've done this before, you've been through this before, and this is how you do it. So sometimes what we do is we reignite feelings of the past events, which compound the current circumstance. Thinking about this event will get you to remember a similar event 1 year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and you will begin to have feelings associated with those times and those events. You were not going crazy, you were having a normal reaction to an abnormal event. This is what the prefrontal cortex needs to start saying. We need to be able, with our executive function, be able to say, yeah, you are anxious and you're feeling crazy, but your body is currently reacting normally to a highly abnormal event. This will pass. I want to talk about regression to the mean. This is a statistical principle. This is also a behavioral principle, that no matter how bad it gets or how good it gets, we will always go back to the middle. If you're a C student and you get an A, you will eventually go back to being a C student. When stressed by change, we regress. Thus, regressing equals stressing. Stress eating, stress sleeping, and stressing about stressing. I think there are folks out there right now that are probably saying to themselves, I shouldn't be this upset. I should be able to cope better. I should be handling all these situations more fluidly, and they're disappointed in themselves. I would challenge those folks to back up and say, you're doing the best you can, and we're all kind of upset about the fact that we have these new obstacles and there's stress happening. Or you can have a normal reaction to an abnormal event. You can say, of course I'm stressed out, this is something that's happened and I'm regressing back to my previous coping skills, which is where I want to jump off to the next, is that when we do get stressed, we go back to what we've always known. Patterson's ecology of the mind, he talks about, it's been referred to earlier as a common manifestation of the inertia principle. Under stress, more recently acquired adaptive mechanisms may break down. The organism may revert to earlier, more automatic behavior patterns. So the things that we've been working on so diligently to improve our lives have come into, become ineffective, and so that we step back and start using the things that we used to use. One of the things that I've learned from my experience is that my specialty is in the area of addiction. And what I frequently say is addiction is a disease of relationships. What I mean by that is when the person is engaging in a certain kind of behavior, that behavior will adversely impact their ability to have meaningful connection with others. So for example, the most florid example is a person who uses methamphetamine or heroin. That will have an extreme impact on their relationship with people that love and care about them. A less intrusive addiction would be something like exercise, or maybe overeating or overspending. And the question would be, how do I know that my behavior is having an adverse impact on me? Is this an addiction? And the question is answered by asking the people around you, is what I'm doing having an adverse impact on how we function together? If my spending too much is having an impact on my wife, if my exercising is impacting my ability to spend time with my children, those are issues that we have to begin to discuss, that the behavior we're engaging in to help us cope with this current stress situation, is it having an adverse impact on how we relate to the people we care about? And that is my idea about addiction, is addiction will cause us to have an impact on our relationships. And fairly quickly, the only people that we'll begin to relate to are other people who enable us to continue the addiction process. And so the regression for a person who is suffering from addiction is they will regress back to that previous substance or that activity to comfort their stress. Maslow says it very well. In Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that's what we have pictured here. Maslow said that familiarization, repetition, produces a lowering of the intensity and richness of consciousness, even though it also produces preferences, security, comfort, etc. Familiarization, in a word, makes it unnecessary to attend, to think, to feel, to live fully, to experience richly. He's saying that we like habit. Habit makes us comfortable. Habit makes us feel secure. However, also deprives us of the opportunity to really experience life. And so what I quickly found in the last few weeks is I'm no longer worried about what I'm going to do for my career. I'm no longer worried about how I can connect to other professionals in the community. I've kind of regressed back down to the lower levels of the pyramid, where I'm concerned about my physiological needs, my need for groceries, my need for toilet paper, and of course the safety of myself and the safety of my family. It's unusual right now as an EAP for someone to call me and say, Dan, I've suddenly lost meaning in my work. I just don't feel like I have the meaning in my work that I used to. What's more common is that people are saying, I just don't know how I'm going to survive. And that's where I believe we've all been pushed into a regression, that we're now focused more on the more primitive levels of what Maslow defined as the hierarchy of needs. Excuse me. Do you see any backsliding in yourself? Now, one of the things as I started talking about connections, what I'd like you to ask people is, sometimes we're the least reliable source of information regarding our own productivity and our own performance. When we need to reach outside of ourselves and ask people we trust, hey, how am I doing? What could I do better in this relationship? Is there something I'm doing that's annoying you? Is there something I'm doing that you want to choke me out right now? And what would you like me to do differently? Ask people that you care about, how can you better engage in self-care? What do they see that you could improve on when it comes to just being able to slow down, be nice to yourself, and do something different? The other part of this is, if you don't trust people and you don't value other people's opinions or judgments about you, that should tell you something about the nature of your relationships. As well as number 4, if people are afraid to answer questions honestly, that should also tell you something. I've used this before, and I've had people come to me and say, well, Dan, I did what you asked, and I asked the people how are we doing? And nobody, everyone seemed to think that we're doing fine. And I said, well, how did you address the question? And they'll say, well, I went to them and said, hey, do you have a problem with me? Now, again, the presentation will be, if you're confronted by an angry, aggressive person saying, do you have a problem with me? The majority of us will say, no, I don't have a problem with you. Everything's fine, because we want that person to go away. And that person will come back saying, no one has a problem with me. So that should also tell you a problem, to tell you that you have a problem that people are afraid to answer honestly. Compile the information you get, verify its validity, and make challenges if you would like better relationships, or not. If you like where you are in your life, then there's no reason to change at all. One of my favorite puns is, even the most successful hermit is the person nobody knows. Here's another warning: asking for honest feedback can be painful, but it's probably no reason to avoid it. I want to look at the three-dimensional self. This is a holistic approach to how we deal with things. We talk about feelings, thoughts, and emotions, actions, behaviors. All of these are intimately tied together, and that's what I want to start looking at. When we look at stress, we look at how does it impact our behaviors. Are we the kind of people that our behaviors are accelerated or they're slowed down? Do we have reckless behaviors? Do we become clueless, put ourselves in high-risk situations? Are we avoidant? Are we folks that isolate? Do we have negative verbalizations? We talk badly to ourselves. One of the questions I frequently ask clients is, they'll say, you know, Dan, I really screwed that up. I'm such a loser, and I'm such an idiot. The question I ask is, would you talk to your own child that way? And if you're not willing to talk to your child that way, why are you treating yourself this way? And the answer generally is, this is the way I'm used to being treated. There's positive and negative to a perfectionistic script. If your parents really yelled at you a lot to be perfect, their goal was not to make you hate yourself. Their goal was not to abuse you. A lot of times the goal was for you to feel like you have a connectedness, and they're trying to promote self-love and self-care. I'm just getting a text right now. Oh, excuse me. What I also want to say is, at the end of this presentation, there's going to be a list of resources available. The EAP resources are available, and there will be other resources that are listed in the end of these slides. There's also going to be a question and answer section near the end. So if you have some questions, feel free to write those down, and we'll address those. Let's get back to the slide. The feelings and emotion. Again, take a look at the feelings that you're having right now. The fear, the anxiety about the uncertainty, the unpredictability. I have a lot of, my heart goes out to people who have relationships with people who have the COVID virus, and they're unable to physically, emotionally reach out, physically reach out and touch the people and let them know how they can be, to have the face on FaceTime. That's just, I can't imagine what that's like. So there's this sense of helplessness and hopelessness. I think paranoia is in there too. I've gotten to the point right now where I'm so used to being sort of isolated that I see someone walking and I hope they don't come over and try to shake my hand. And then of course the thoughts and are feeling overwhelmed. This is horrible. I feel self-destructive. I can't do this. I don't deserve this. We somehow personalize that this is about us and that this is retribution for something I've done in the past. The interventions that we use for all of these are holistic, and we can break these out because, again, with behavior management techniques, if you want to get someone to stop doing something, punish them. Just punish them really severely, and they'll probably quit doing that. But that argument falls apart when we look at the prison systems. We have lots of people locked up that we think we're punishing, we're actually probably not punishing. So when we look at changing behaviors, we look at contingency management, we look at their past personal learning styles. We look at progressive relaxation. We look at trying to get people to change the behaviors. Feelings and emotions, we can use psychodynamic approaches. We can use grounding techniques. We can use mindfulness. Thoughts and feelings, we can talk about thinking errors, cognitive interventions. We can talk about psycholinguistics. We can talk about spiritual approaches. All of these approaches are used to address the issue in a very holistic way. The one thing that I did not put in here was medications, because again, medications kind of impacts everything. If you take a medication, it can knock out your behaviors and your feelings and your thought processes. And so I want to talk about that intervention for just a second. And I'm not anti-medication. I think medication has a place for all of us. But one of the things I would like us to do is be a little bit more cognizant about when and how we can use medications. And the argument I frequently make is when this stress happened and I suddenly had my life in flux, I started doing things I don't normally do. Well, if you look back at the time in your life when you were the most centered and most happy in your life, you probably were doing a routine of things, of behaviors. You were eating well, you were exercising, you had friends that you were going out, you had hobbies you were engaging in. And the question is if you were happy at that point and you're not doing those things anymore, what are the chances that you're happy if you're not doing things that make you happy? And then the argument becomes, was it the crisis that caused us to stop doing the behaviors, or did we stop the behaviors because of the crisis? And then as a consequence of the crisis, the neurochemistry, the dopamine centers, the serotonin centers, they all get rewired and we start suddenly not feeling like we used to feel. We lose ambition, we lose motivation, we start talking badly to ourselves. So which came first, the chicken or the egg? Was the neurochemistry took a dump and the behaviors changed? And my argument is it doesn't matter. What my argument is what can we do to stop the regression? What can we do to stop people from, coming home, isolating, eating less ice cream, Netflix binging, and then feeling horrible about themselves? What can we do to get you to start looking at self-care and start talking positive to yourself, start treating yourself well, and start thinking differently? You have the capacity to act out of depression or the capacity to act out of anxiety. But you're the person who has to make the decision and see you're the person that needs to learn what your rewards are and what your own punishments are. I'm having to revamp my life right now because my rewards, like I said, I had a trip planned to Costa Rica. I have a planned trip to Jamaica in July, and I think that's not going to happen either. And those were things that were highly motivating to me. To go sit on a beach, to go to be in the ocean, those are highly motivating to me. And those aren't things that I can use as motivators now. So what now am I going to do to find motivation to keep moving forward? This is a video we put in here. I'm hoping it works, and if it doesn't, we'll go back and I'll do a summary for you. It obviously didn't work. What I wanted to say was in the video is that gentleman there is in jail. Let's back up for a second. This guy's sitting in jail and he's on his way to being released. And while he's in there getting ready to be released, he starts reminiscing on his time in jail. And he says, the guards really tried to help me. They really tried to get me to read books. They really tried to educate me on changing my life. And I'm really not interested in that. I'm pretty happy with where I'm at. I'm good with the way things are. I just want to get out of here. My girlfriend seems to be really looking good. She's really interested in me. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to get out of jail. I'm going to work out a bit. I'm going to eat better. Probably going to quit smoking. Well, quit smoking cigarettes and then maybe work off the dope. The question that I then ask is, what are the chances this guy's going to change if he is interacting this way with others? And so as he was talking, he talked about doing illegal things like smoking dope, avoiding books, not hanging out with pro-social people. And the predictability for me was he's going to be back in jail very, very soon because he has this pattern of behaving. The feelings that he demonstrated was he did not seem distressed. He seemed quite content, expectant. Maybe he seemed annoyed that people wanted him to change, that they wanted him to read and they wanted him to do different things. His thoughts and cognitions were that he's self-smarted. He knows what he needs to do. Books can kill you, and you just use your best thinking to get where you're at. The questions I ask, is he real aware of his real situation? Is he congruent? Now, when I talk about congruence, does he see himself the way that other people see him? He sees himself as fairly happy and content, and he's sitting in jail, and I think that would say there's probably some incongruence in his life because people who love him say you deserve better than going back to jail. He seems to think that his life is working for him, and he seems to think that he's getting what he's hoped for. And if he's not getting what he hoped for, what's keeping him from achieving meaning in his life, which goes right to number 5, is that he's pretty much wrapped up in the habit of what he's always done. And there's not enough discomfort right now for him to feel like he really needs to change. Where jail might be a discomfort for many of us that encourage us to want to change, he's become accustomed to that consequence, and as a consequence of the consequence, doesn't really need to or want to change. Best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. We've all heard this one. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. Nothing changes, nothing changes. If you always do what you always done, you'll always get what you always got. And one of my favorites is by Einstein, who said, the significant problems we have, we cannot be solved at the same level of thinking for which we created them. I believe we have to back up and reevaluate what we've done and what we're doing to be able to get progress. I want to talk about this again real quickly. When I developed this slide, I made a boo-boo, and I'll share this boo-boo with you, is that I really didn't want to separate out the thoughts and behaviors. I really wanted to separate out the thoughts and emotions. And that's what I want to talk about now, is how thoughts and emotions are tied together. I liked there's 2 sayings by William Shakespeare that I really treasure. The first saying by William Shakespeare is, he believes in the nature of connectedness. And what he says is, love all, trust a few, do wrong to none. Love all, trust all, do wrong to none. I believe our goal on the world, for being in the world, is that we want to make connections with people. And he also says, Shakespeare also says, things are neither good nor bad, thinking makes it so. And that's what I want to focus on, is that positive things equal positive, positive thoughts equal positive feelings. Man's not disturbed by events, man's disturbed by his perception of those events. Our personal definitions will create personal feelings. When we see something, do we demonize it or do we nostalgicize it? Albert Ellis calls it awfulizing. And awfulizing is a key process in addiction. That if I take a neutral stimulus and I make it awful, I have a reason to get drunk or to get high. If I see my boss look at me funny, I can say, oh my gosh, my boss is looking at me funny because of something I did. He's probably upset about the project I didn't complete. If I don't get this project completed, I'll get a bad AR. If I get a bad AR, I'll lose my job. I'll end up homeless. And I take one event, I awfulize it, and then I think the only way I can cope with my homelessness is to get drunk tonight. And so I frequently want us to back up and say, when your boss was looking at you, was he really looking at you funny, or were you looking at him funny, or what really was happening? I want people to evaluate what they're thinking. Reprogramming the brain is based on using language to convey reality in a rational way. The only way we can reprogram our brain is by the way we talk to ourselves and the way we register the things in our lives. Expectations create positive or negative outcomes. If I fail at this, my life is over. Again, this is that very black and white thinking, that very perfectionistic thinking that allows us to be driven, but not only driven forward, but we can use perfectionistic thinking to drive us down. Strong feelings when violated create strong beliefs when violated create strong feelings. This is the essence of what we're talking about today. That if you have a strong emotional reaction to something, that strong emotional reaction is driven by a belief that you have in your head. And the belief is something like, this shouldn't have happened. The virus should not have interrupted my life. And the reality is, it has interrupted our lives. And how do we change that belief? How do we make that belief rational? The way I view the world determines the world and the way I feel about it. I believe strongly in this as well. Feelings help in the change of my thoughts. Now, two worldviews. The first worldview is, I call it the way I see it. That's the rational, realistic worldview. I call it the way I see it is translated as 99% of the people will agree with us. They'll say, this is a chair, this is a floor, this is a ceiling, this is a laptop. 99% of the people will agree with a real worldview. I call it the way it is. This is the way it is. This is a chair, this is a table. Irrational worldview, the idealistic worldview, is I call it the way I see it. Instead of seeing this as a computer, I see this as the great communicator. I see this as the center of my universe. How do we know that a laptop is now a problem in the world? Well, it's because we will have people argue that I should have my laptop because the laptop is the only way I can connect with people. Really, it's a laptop, and really you are connecting with people, but it's not the only way you can connect with people, and it would be nice if you were able to connect with other people. So what we want to see is that when people have irrational beliefs that the world should be a certain way, and I call it the way I see it, then those folks will have a very strong emotional response to the stimulus. Rational thought. So here's a quick outline of CBT. There's an action, there's a belief, there's a consequence, there's a dispute, and there's an evaluation period. What I want to focus on is the consequence. What are the strong emotions that are driving you right now? And what are the strong, and if there's a strong emotion, what are the beliefs that are being violated in your mind that are driving the strong emotions? Again, my trip shouldn't have been canceled. I should be able to go to work. I should be able just to do what I've always done. It's not right that I have to stay at home and I have to let the dog out and I have to clean the litter box. I should be doing what I've always done. Because I'm not at home, because I'm not doing what I've always done, then I'm having strong emotions. And to dispute the irrational belief, to go to the D's section, I have to be able to say, my strong emotions are based on the non-reality or the irrationality that the world should be different when indeed the world is the way it is. And to rewrite the belief, I need to be able to say, I wish this wasn't happening. It would be a lot better if this crisis had not erupted to the point that we now have to stay home and we now have to evaluate who we are as professionals and who we are personally. And I wish I was able to negotiate homeschooling at the same point I'm trying to do my job. I just wish this was a different episode of my life. If I begin to reword the irrational beliefs to rational beliefs, I start having less extreme feelings and start having feelings of inconvenience, irritation, annoyance, but they're feelings that I can learn to deal with in a more rational way. Examples I use as a stimulus is a speed limit sign. Now, is a speed limit sign a real thing or is it an irrational thing? And when you see a speed limit sign, how do you define it? You say, speed limit sign says you ought to drive 55 miles an hour. You should drive 55 miles an hour. Is that an ideal? Or is it a suggestion that says they would really like us to drive 55, and some people do and some people don't? And I have a special rule about 55 is I have a 10% rule. I drive 10% over, and as a consequence of driving 10% over, I probably won't get a ticket. The folks that will drive us crazy are the people who stick to 55. They are the absolute people who believe if it says 55, you should drive 55. And if you pass them at 63, they will be upset with you because you're not doing what you should be doing. So again, a speed limit sign in a rational way, or do you look at it in an irrational way? As we begin to have strong emotions up and look at the thoughts that are driving this strong emotions, then thoughts are the words that we use, and the words we need to avoid the most are ought, should, must, always, and never. If you want to pick a fight with your wife or with your kids tonight, go home and tell them, you guys never listen to me. You always do the wrong thing. You should have mowed the lawn. And as you start keeping irrationality on them, there will be strong emotional consequences for everybody to go around. Now, this is the meat and potatoes of the thought experiment. What I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you folks to do a few things. As I'm asking you to do these things, what I want you to do is I want you to check into your own thinking, and I want you to take notes about what you're saying to yourself. And what I want to do is I want to be able to evaluate, are the things that you're saying to yourself, are they helping you engage in self-care, or are these things that are keeping you stuck in the same things you've done over and over again? So here we go. One of the first things I want people to do is recognize when you have too much stress. Know your own triggers as well as your own strengths when it comes to coping with stress. Realize the uniqueness of your reactions. Some of us, when we get stressed out, start futzing. We start trying to reorganize our lives. We'll start cleaning compulsively. We'll start doing things that seem unusual. And when I start worrying about, is the bathroom floor clean enough, I know I need to go take a walk and chill out. I have to know that I'm stressing out, and my stress means that I have to give myself more work and more stress to work with. And we have to stop and back up for a second. Talk out your troubles, find someone you trust. This is hard to do right now. We just don't have the connectedness we used to have. Find someone you trust and vent. Avoid people who give too much advice and want to rescue you. Avoid hashing over the same work details or relationship conflicts over and over. Learn a systematic, drug-free method of relaxation. Tai Chi, meditation, yoga, progressive relaxation are healthy ways to reduce stress. But such methods require a lot of commitment, and they require motivation on your part. Yoga is painful. Trying to bend over and touch your toes is not an easy task. Now, as I'm telling you these things, I want you to check into your thinking. What are you saying to yourself as I'm saying, hey, take some time out. Make yourself a priority. Get some regular exercise. Find something you enjoy, walking, skating, biking. Participate as often as possible. And don't make exercise a force smart. We find people who start training rigorously, and then pretty quickly they're so in tune to the training that the training becomes the new problem in their relationships. The people around them will say, he's never around because he's always training. That becomes the issue. Proper nutrition, eat well, eat right. My brain keeps telling me eating well and eating right now is eating lots of sweets. And I'm loving hot dogs right now, which I deprived myself of for several years. Now I know why I deprived myself of hot dogs. However, we need to take care and listening to ourselves, and we need to look at, if we're not doing very well, let's talk to some professionals about what a good diet would look like, because maybe we've lost our way through this time. Learn to plan. Disorganization breeds stress. Having too many projects, too little time, and no energy is extremely taxing. Scheduling yourself some playtime, prioritize, delegate, and make small rewards at the end of each step. What are you doing to reward yourself? What have you got planned for the evening to relax? Netflix binging is, wow, that's good stuff. However, is it so much that other people are having a hard time being in contact with you, and you choose Netflix over having a real communication with somebody. I want you to sleep. Know how much is enough and how much is too much. Getting 7 or 8 hours per night on a routine basis helps, basis is spelled wrong, helps moderate stress. Find ways to promote deep, restful sleep through natural remedies. Again, I believe that if you cannot sleep, I encourage people to go a couple of days without sleep because you don't need to sleep right now. People stress about not sleeping, which compounds the sleeping problem. I encourage people to learn to sleep through natural remedies, through exercise, and finding a way to relax in a more productive way. Recognize and accept limits. Avoid setting unreasonable expectations for yourself. Set yourself up for success by creating rational goals. Learn to say no to consistently demand time. When I talk about saying no, I'm talking about the relationship aspect of this talk again, where a lot of times we're afraid to say no to people because we're afraid we'll hurt them, we'll somehow cause damage to them. And what I want us to do is start to understand that saying no to people is not a bad thing. Not a bad thing. And sometimes saying no to other people is a positive thing for us, and it's a positive thing for them. Have fun, learn to play, learn to appreciate, find pastimes that are absorbing and enjoyable, investigate hobbies, add to the old, and have a sense of humor. How many folks are, I've run into people who say they don't have hobbies, and that's amazing to me, that they don't have things they enjoy doing. And this is the time to start looking for something like that. And at some point we have to laugh about this. We have to look at this and say, there's some humor in this. I don't know what it is yet, but there's gotta be. I liked someone who was saying, you know, we talked about the freshman 25, when you put on 25 pounds as a freshman, and they're now talking about the COVID-19. I swear I put on 19 pounds since this has happened, and the self-isolation, because again, instead of engaging in self-care, I'm overeating, and I'm overeating because overeating brings me a sense of gratification right now, but long-term is going to have an impact on my health and on my well-being. Find a new perspective. So what's the purpose for this? This is as bad as it could get, and next time I'll know better. You know, I kept thinking the end of times was more along the Walking Dead catastrophe of zombie apocalypse, and this doesn't seem to fit that. So maybe this isn't the end of times. Look for a way to soothe and not a way to belittle or berate. Find meaning in the challenges through spiritual or philosophical context. What is it that you say to yourself? Life is what? Life is a box of chocolates. Life is a bummer. Life is a lemon. Life is, one of my favorites is, life is short and death is mean, so get some loving in between. Life is but a walking shadow. What is it that your perspective is, and what is the summary statement you're going to make? Now, again, as I started talking about these are not new concepts. This is stuff many of you folks already know. You're bright human beings. As I was talking to you, and you already know about self-care, what were you thinking? And most importantly, what were you saying to yourself? When I said take a walk or exercise or find a hobby, did you say, yeah, but that's not going to work? I don't know if I can do that. I can't do that. These are the vocalizations of a person who's stuck. These are the words that a person who speaks that is not able to change will parrot to us. And they're not doing it on purpose. They're doing it because their brain is stuck. They will tell you, I can't do that, in contrast to saying, I'm currently unable to participate in that activity. They will just say, I can't walk tonight. I want people to start evaluating what they're saying to others and to themselves. They will say, whatever. They will say, I don't know. Perfect example of this is if your son comes home and you say, how was school today? And he says, I don't know. And you say, oh, okay. What you've just reinforced in him is that I don't know becomes an adequate answer. And from that time forward, if you reward, I don't know, when something serious happens and you say, what happened? He will say, I don't know, even though he actually probably does know. We can talk about the yeah buts, the I'm sorries, the mock agreements. You're right, I should do those things. Those are a great idea. However, I'm not going to do them anyway. I don't care what you're saying. My life sucks. It's going to end here. I don't remember. I'll try, or These are all verbalizations that indicate a person who might be stuck. And if you're using these, I'm encouraging you to rewrite your thinking, to reprogram your brain by using different language. The takeaways I want from this presentation today are: this moment in time can be seen as a trauma, as a crisis, or an opportunity for an improved relationship with yourself. And I really, really hope you believe in the latter, that this is an opportunity for you to improve how you deal with yourself. Also, that this is a regression. This is a temporary regression to the mean. We all do it. Let's push away from labels and look at the data and evidence and formulate, and stop formulating a negative assumption. Start formulating a positive assumption. I'm going to use this time to start reading again. I'm going to use this time to start writing again. I'm going to use this time to start looking at a better relationship with my children. I want to look at this time in a different way. And what are you willing and able to do differently? In the three-dimensional self, what are you going? Where are you going to start? Are you going to tell yourself you shouldn't think that way, you shouldn't feel that way, you shouldn't behave that way, or are you going to say, I would really like to make some thoughtful changes. I would really like to make some behavioral changes. And what's your commitment to get back to your A or B game? I'm not asking you to get your A plus game. I'm asking, what do you need to get back to an A or a B game, or even a C game at this point? And what are you willing to do? Are you aware of your real situation? Do others agree with you? These are questions I want you to ask yourself. Is your life working for you? Are you getting the things you hope for? If not, what is keeping you from achieving meaning in your life? What's the voice in your head telling you? Who's telling you you can't do this? How willing have you been, and how willing are you going to be to do something different? And how much of your inability to change is based on the ease of habit that you've fallen back into? Questions and feedback. So I think this is where we're at now. Blanca? Hello.
Yeah, there's a question here.
Okay.
Can some of these stress behaviors, emotions, and thoughts be also considered to be positive, as it may slow down your reactions and therefore be more mindful? Or is it because it is going overboard that your thinking process are not working correctly?
Yes, absolutely. That's a great question. I believe that everything negative has a positive aspect to it. I believe our irrational thoughts have given us some really, really positive things. Again, a perfectionistic script teaches us to be detail-oriented, to look at things very critically, and as a consequence of that, we make huge strides in progress in our lives. However, if we don't slow it down and back it off, we use that same ironclad rule to drive ourselves consistently, and the positive quickly becomes the negative. I should have done that differently. I should have known better. I should have paid attention. I should have done more of this and more of that. And pretty soon we're dissolving ourselves into the critical self. So I think there's a yin and a yang. There's a positive and negative to all of the thinking that we're doing. And what I'm asking people to do is back up and say, is this a situation where I need to be saying this shouldn't have happened, or is this a situation where I say, yeah, I wish this wouldn't have happened? And I want people to get clearer in their thinking and be more mindful in the way that they're talking to themselves, interacting with others as well. Great question.
At the moment, we don't have any other questions, so if anybody would like to ask any questions that they're thinking about, they can do it now.
One of the questions that I ask when I do the human reliability and performance evaluations on people in safety sensitive positions who are weapons carriers, one of the questions I will frequently ask them is, what is it that your wife or your significant other complains that you do too much of? And that's a question that I would have you ask yourself, is what's something currently that you're probably doing too much of? And sometimes what that plays out to be is I'm playing video games too much. I'm talking negatively too much to myself. I'm nagging my wife too much. I'm watching too much TV. I'm on my phone too much. That's the question I'm asking everyone right now, is what are the things that people would say, you're probably doing too much of that. And the opposite of addiction is the ability to have a menu of attractive alternatives. And instead of coming home and watching Netflix or getting on the phone, what could you do differently, and what would be a more positive way for you to interact with yourself and with others that would be healthier?
Dr. Weinrich, this is Noelle. Would you mind sharing the slides that show the resources for the public INL and the universities?
You betcha. Just a second. Thank you, Noelle.
Thank you.
Also in this presentation, I have a bunch of the thinking concerns that were presented. Here's the INL emergency, and then here's for emerging contacts for U of I. Am I running through these too fast? Noelle?
Dan?
Excuse me?
We have a few more questions.
Okay.
What is your suggestion if the same household has different levels of concern about the virus? And
Could you say that again, please?
tension.
Excuse me?
And you want us to repeat it?
Yes, please.
Okay, it's what is your suggestion if the same household has different levels of concern about the virus and that creates tension?
So I assume that I'm going to awfulize a little bit here, but my assumption is that I'm the kind of person that believes that the coronavirus is so much hooey, and I'm going to go out and I'm just going to interact with whoever I want to and be who I want to be. And the other people in the home are much more vigilant about concerns about the virus, and are very cognizant of wanting to maintain social distance and avoid the exposure. So you have the two extremes, the very black and white. I guess the question, the comment would be that the person who is the conservative person who's concerned about the coronavirus, making sure that you are aware that by disregarding my beliefs and my concerns and my feelings, that what you're doing is you're indicating that your desires, your beliefs are more important than mine. And I guess that makes this desire for me to isolate physically from you a little easier, knowing that you really don't appreciate how critical I believe this to be. So basically, if I keep threatening you with my behavior, what that indicates is I really don't respect you and I really don't have an appreciation for what you believe. And to me, that would make social isolation a little easier, even if it is in the same household. I know that's an awkward thing to do. But what you have is you have someone who's saying, I really don't care that you're worried about your own health, and I'm going to do what I want to do. And I would suspect that that's not the only place the person does that kind of behavior.
Thank you. There's another question, which is, what if you're dealing with another crisis on top of this COVID crisis? How do you differentiate the stressors between the two?
I guess it would depend on the stressor, but part of this is, I would say that we're all probably running on 6 cylinders to begin with. We're not. I don't know if a lot of people have risen to the occasion and they're all functioning on all 8 cylinders, but I would assume you're all already running on 6 cylinders, and that if you have another crisis come up, you need to sit back and say, what's the best I can do at this point? What is the very best I can do at this point without draining additional resources? And I keep going back to these folks who find out their family members, their parents, their good friends are in the hospital with the virus, and there's nothing they can do. And that's a crisis on top of a crisis. And what can that person do to engage in self-care at that point? Because really feeling hopeless and overwhelmed will result in them engaging in, bad behavior that will bring them some immediate satisfaction, but long-term discontent. So I would say make yourself the priority, realize you're not running on all 8 cylinders, and what can you do to express the desire to help other people, but you are the priority. Because a second and a third and a fourth crisis could be coming down the track.
Perfect. Another question that just came up. What advice do you have for those who are single and spending all their time with no physical contact?
Oh. Wow, that's a loaded question. You've heard about these, again, it sparks the whole electronics addiction piece. People on all kinds of dating apps, and people on phone apps, on Grindr, on Tinder, on Plenty of Fish. There's all kinds of distractions. There's pornography, there's all sorts of distractions, but the question is going to be, what long-term can you do that's going to make you feel good about having done the 2020 thing? During the 2020 thing, I was alone and I was by myself, and what I did is I got into literature, I got into poetry, I got into painting. What are you going to do to improve yourself so long-term when you start relationships, you'll have something to talk about? I think the other things, the electronic stuff, is distractors. I think people, it's preferable if people learn how to get along with themselves and then figure out, okay, what's my next step? And oh, by the way, we've been in this for a month now, and this could go longer. And if you're already needing that human connectedness and human contact, and sort of a true need, maybe that's an issue we need to look at and talk about.
Yeah, so along the same lines, and tell me if you already answered this, but what do you tell to folks who are alone with no family around them right now? And is Skype, texting, and phones helpful for reaching out, but are there other options to help people feel not alone?
Use it. Connect with people. We need connection. I'm not trying to say, learn to be alone. I'm saying use electronics to connect, but use it in a way that it's a true connection. And it's not just I'm feeling lonely, so I need to text somebody right now. I'm feeling lonely and I've been painting for a couple hours now, and I want to show what I've created. I want it to be the positive and the negative of the electronic age is it brings us some great stuff, and it also brings some alienation.
Okay, here's one. How can we help and support others? Earlier, you cautioned against seeking help from those who want to rescue you, How can we be
Yes.
good supports to others?
And when I talk about rescue, this is that I make you into my project. I call you every day and I make sure that you're eating, that you're drinking, and you suddenly become my project. And what that keeps me from doing is I'm always rescuing you and never taking care of my own situation. No, what I believe is a balance is I reach out to people and say, I've been thinking about you. I miss you. How's everything going? And at that time, as the person says, well, you know, I just haven't been motivated to eat. It's like, well, what can I do to encourage you to eat? What can I do to encourage you to make a nice, good breakfast tomorrow? Even though I'm 100 miles away, what can I do to encourage you to engage in self-care? So that's, again, the negative and the positive is rescue has a negative connotation in that I'm saving you from yourself. And really what I want people to do is reach out, make connections, let them know that you care, and that's what we need to do. I believe the best thing that in life is being able to catch people being good, to randomly reach out to people and just say, hey, I've been thinking about you. I miss our conversations. That's what I'm looking for.
Perfect. Here's one about family. So what do you do about teenagers who spend the entire day sleeping or playing video games?
Yeah, this is going to be the hard one. And the reason we do that is because we don't want to upset the apple cart. Because we know that in the past, best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. We know in the past that when we've confronted them on sleeping too much or playing their video games, it results in a temper tantrum or sulking for the rest of the day. And so what we do is we just let the behavior maintain itself. We just let the habit take over and they don't really thrive. And that's where I believe in open, honest communication, which is I'm real confused about what to do right now. I really want to have a conversation about how I see what you're doing long term is not working for us, and what can I do to encourage you to go for a walk with me and the dog this afternoon? And what can I do to encourage you to not sleep so much and get up early and go for a walk? What can I do to encourage you to limit your time on the telephone? What can I do as your parent to encourage you? I don't want to punish you. I want to figure out how I can reward you for doing the right things. I think this is about the crucial conversations. This is the ability to try to communicate as clearly as possible. And this is a difficult time to do it because our only connectedness is electronic. And what we have to now start modeling and practicing is connectedness face to face.
Okay, here's one about work managers. Do you have any suggestions for dealing with a work manager who's not sensitive to why an employee or their employees are not as productive during this time?
I would go, there's some great books out there by a guy by the name of Robert Sutton, who's an organizational psychologist. I would recommend that the person, it's S-U-T-T-O-N, Robert Sutton. He's probably listed in my reference guide at the end of this presentation. I get a hold of some of his literature. But part of this is the person needs to be able to the employee needs to clearly communicate that they're doing the best they can. And I wonder that the employee can wonder out loud, I wonder if other people are struggling as much as I am. And this is, why is one person being held to the fire and the other people aren't? Because I gotta believe that not everybody's functioning on their A game right now. And so that would be the question for the employee, is in that curiosity about, I wonder how many people are getting this sort of attention and how this sort of attention is helping them better themselves.
Great ideas. There's one about eating, and I'll just remind those who are still online that we will be having a seminar. It's one of these COVID seminars about healthy eating and healthy exercising. But in the meantime, Dan, We have one attendee who says he's been eating way too much Easter candy and other foods since it's readily available. Do you have any suggestions?
Yes, get rid of it, but not eat it. Yes, and I appreciate his candor and his honesty, because what he's doing is he's expressing exactly what we're all doing, is that during this time of stress, it's the thing that's most immediate to us that's going to bring us the relief. Whether it's eating, whether it's spending online, whatever the negative behavior is, that's the problem. And my suggestion is, my wife and I have been, sending out for groceries. We're not buying junk food because we know we cannot resist. So this is an alcoholic who is not ordering beer. This is, yes, get rid of the Easter candy. And he needs to find an attractive alternative to his stress management. What is the attractive alternative to eating Easter candy that will make him feel useful and fulfilled? And it doesn't, whatever, it could be taking the dog for a walk. It could be finishing that poem he's writing. What can he do that he's not doing?
Excellent. Here's one about personal life again. How can you deal with being isolated with people who drain you?
You have to understand that they're draining you and you don't let them do it. You have to find people who are additive and not subtractive. So this is a person who's saying to me, hey, I know that these people are draining my battery. And I'm saying, okay, then you have to start hanging out with people who don't drain your battery. Whether that's an online presence, whether that's a telephone presence, they need to limit their exposure to the people that drain the battery, and they need to find those people who recharge them and spend more time with the people that recharge them. The people that will drain them will predictably not react well. They will complain and they'll whine, and the person who's drawing a boundary needs to be able to predict that this is not going to be an easy task. This will be the same task as confronting a teenager on not spending so much time on the computer.
Excellent. Do you think perhaps some people can use the classification of being emotional as a way to deflect responsibility or not to address an underlying problem? And how do you deal with those people?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Emotionality, when we were talking today, CBT has, at the end of this presentation, there are a bunch of thinking errors. There's 10 thinking errors. And one of the thinking errors that's commonly engaged in is emotional thinking or emotional reasoning. And those are people who will say, well, I'm just different than you. My emotionality doesn't allow me to think as precisely or whatever. And that needs to be called out for that. What the person is basically saying is, if you can't relate to my emotions and you can't relate to my emotionality, then you can't relate to me. At some point, someone needs to be able to say, I guess you're right, unless you want me to relate to you and you want to change your emotionality and what that means. I see it the same way that I see people who say, you can't relate to me because I'm a vet, or you can't relate to me because I'm a recovering addict, or you can't relate to me because I'm an engineer. It's all this uniqueness that requires that other people bend over backwards to be in a relationship. And I think that's silly.
Blanca, are you back on? Nope.
Hello?
Okay, there was a follow-up, Dan, on the draining question. What if it's your children that are draining you?
Give them an attractive alternative. Tell your kids, hey, I appreciate the fact that you want to be around me. However, you need to go do something else. And have a list of things for them to do. Fortunately, right now, the weather is going to start warming up, so you will have some more options. But don't let your children drain you. Teach your children to be self-soothing and self-entertaining, independent of a computer screen and electronics. In fact, reward the heck out of them. If they take a jog around the block, you'll bake them cookies. Find something to get them to do something alternative, an alternative activity, and then reward the heck out of it. And chances are it will get repeated. And oh, by the way, you'll be a bad parent by doing that.
Okay, it looks like we have one last question. What
right,
are the good outcomes? What are the good outcomes that you see coming out of this crisis?
My favorite is going to be, I guess it depends on your generation. I think for me, I'm looking forward to being able to be more technologically savvy. I'm looking forward to being able to understand technology better, and learning how to do relationships long distance versus, having to do the face-to-face all the time. So for me, it's going to be a powerful way for me to learn how to do connectedness and behaviors differently. So I think for generations, it's going to be different. For the generations that are technologically gifted, this might not be the hiccup. But I think the most positive thing will be our ability to rewrite our scripts. What have we wanted to do for ourselves and for our futures? And what has this taught us about the future for ourselves? I'm not going to be able to retire as soon as I wanted. Well, what does that mean for me? Or I'm not going to be able to complete my education the way I wanted to. What's that going to mean for me? So I believe the challenge is finding those new decisions and then making a change and changing our own script.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Dr. Weinrich, for all this. And to those of you listening, we are going to send the slides out to the email addresses that you used when you registered. If you have any other questions, just shoot me an email, noel@inl.gov, noel@inl.gov. Thanks for tuning in to the first of the seminar series. Dan, any final thoughts?
No, I sure appreciate the opportunity to do this, and I appreciate the connectedness. It felt awkward, but I'm getting used to it. So thank you very much.
You were fantastic. Thanks to everyone.
Oh, thank you. You too.